Hello.
Hi.
I made it. Sorry, I had a budget advisory meeting for the school district starting at 5. And I got another Zoom I'm supposed to go to at 7 something. So
Yeah,
it's one of those days.
yeah, this was a week for Zooms.
Yeah. This is just a day for it today. It's been a crazy day. June, how did the, so it got delayed? They had more work to do or?
This was related to a sculpture for the library. Yeah, they actually realized when they got there that they needed to talk with the sculptor to describe more what they want so he can narrow it down.
Oh, all right.
So, yeah,
Well, just as well then. Okay.
yes, very much, you know. So he's gonna have some ideas and then, you know, go from there.
Okay. I'm going to get a glass of water before we get started.
Okay, and we'll begin now. All right. I think it's time, right?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, Joe. Good evening and welcome to the Pleasant Hill General Plan Advisory Committee meeting for December 18th. And just real quick for the public, if you wish to call in, our phone number is 925-671-5285, and we'll take comments during our public comment period. So call in and staff will place you on a hold and we'll recognize you when the time comes. With that, Troy, can we have a roll call?
You certainly can. Councilmember Nowak.
Vice Mayor Nowak, yes, I'm here.
Vice Mayor Nowak, sorry. Councilmember Carlson.
Yes, here.
It's a big bowl.
Planning Chair Vincent. Planning Vice Chair Weiler.
Present.
And our Architectural Commissioner will be absent due to a family quasi-emergency. So Carla will not be joining us tonight.
I hope everything is okay.
Yeah.
All right. Our next item is public comment. So if there's a member from the public who'd like to address the General Plan Advisory Committee, the number to call is 925-671-5285. You're limited to 3 minutes. Larry, do we have anybody?
We have no calls at this time, sir.
Wonderful. With that, we'll move on to item 3, which is our update on project activities and status by our consulting team. Troy, take it away.
Thank you, Councilmember Carlson. As you all know, we had multiple general plan advisory committee meetings before this pandemic hit, and we were making great progress. Then the pandemic hit, and now we've had to take a little break. Turned out to be a big break, but we are now back on board and wanted to restart our general plan update process. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our consultants. Jim Harnish will be here tonight. I believe Brent, who you're more familiar with, will be joining us later. He had jury duty, so he's not able to join us from the beginning. But Jim, more than capable, will take over and we'll give a brief overview to get everyone caught up to where we are, and then we'll get into the topic du jour for the day. So with that, Jim, if you would like to take over.
Great, thanks, Troy. Members of the council and planning commission, my name is Jim Harnish. I'm the principal and owner of Inter Harnish, and I would like to attribute this change to the virus, but it's not. Brent is, as Troy said, Brent's on jury duty. He'll be joining us in a little bit, and Rick is on vacation. So you get to go to the bench tonight, but just so you know, I have been close to the project. I've reviewed all the documents that you've seen, so I'm familiar with everything that's been going on, and I'd like to provide an overview of kind of where we've been, talk a little bit about general plans and how we approach them and structure them, and then talk specifically about the hazards and safety element that's before you tonight. So I have a PowerPoint that I will share with you. Oh, hold on. I did that too soon. I'm a neophyte when it comes to screen sharing. I can be on I've done a lot of Zoom, but everybody else does the presentations instead. So let me get over here and we'll get this going. Okay, here we go. So it's a kind of summarizing the purpose. We'll give you an overview of the project status, the general plan policy documents in general, the hazard and safety element, and then it's open for your initial discussion on the element, and then we'll talk about next steps. So this is the first meeting since March. It's been quite a while. We have been busy working away on the policy document, so we haven't been completely quiet during this period of time, but it has been a little bit quieter. You kind of left off with planning and design workshops last November, and your last meeting in February, you recommended a preferred alternative. We're preparing a document, policy document, as I said, and the housing element is coming up as well, which has some significant implications to the land use alternatives. And so we'll end up re-reviewing the alternatives phase a bit. So to give you an overview of general plans, we kind of look at them as in a hierarchy. You have a vision and guiding principles that you blessed already. The policy document itself is goals, policies, and implementation programs. So just to kind of review the vision as a description of an ideal future, and we'll show that your vision to you in a moment. And then the guiding principles are kind of what I like to refer to as an umbrella for the general plan. Even when you're looking at alternatives, all of the alternatives you consider should fall under that umbrella, so that you're not looking, any choices that you're looking at fall within the overall structure of the guiding principles that you've established. And then the general plan itself is organized in a hierarchy with a series of goals in each element. policies under each of the goals, and then implementation programs as appropriate. Not all policies require implementation programs. Some policies are implemented through the city's budgeting and finance process. Many of them are implemented through your project review process, so that they're used to guide the staff recommendations and commission recommendations and council decisions based on these policies. And then the implementation programs are really should be a limited number of actions that are required to follow up the general plan. So this is just to remind you, the vision statement that you've blessed in the last year, and then a series of guiding principles. And so not all guiding principles relate to all of the general plan elements. And so in this case, the guiding principle related to public safety would kind of be the umbrella for the hazard and safety element. So we're getting deep into the planner nerd weeds when we talk about what the definition of a vision and a guiding principle is, but I just wanted to put this up for you. We as planners look back at these distinctions and definitions to help guide the work that we're putting together for you. But this just gives you kind of an idea of going from the very broad vision to a particular action statement. And implementation programs, for example, require a specific action. They have a beginning and an end, whereas a goal is kind of a more broad statement that doesn't necessarily require a specific action. So if you've had a chance to look at the draft hazards and safety element that we've provided, it has the goals of policies and programs, as I mentioned before, but I just wanted to kind of give you a reader's guide as you go through this and kind of understand what our thinking is in terms of how we've structured this and how maybe you should look at that. The goals, typically we have one goal and then a series of on a topic, and then a series of policies underneath it. So we have a numbering structure that keeps us organized. So the hazard and safety goals and policies will all have an HS designator next to them. The land use goals and policies would have an LU, so it's pretty simple and straightforward. We try to provide a brief title for each of the policies to just kind of flag the subject matter of the policy. And we may put policy icons in, and these tend to be cross-cutting issues that HC, for example, stands for healthy communities. So you don't necessarily have need a healthy communities element to have healthy community policies. And we call them cross-cutting because they fall into a number of different categories. They might be in land use, they might be mobility, they might be in parks and recreation. So we'll kind of flag those. The general plan EIR is a unique EIR, and it evaluates the general plan, but the mitigation measures typically are new or revised policies or programs. And so someplace down the line after the EIR is done, you'll see a policy document with some additional policies and programs that come out of the EIR, and we'll flag those by using an icon such as that. Then the implementation programs are a really important part of the policy document, and we pay a lot of attention to these. We identify, for every program, we identify at least one and sometimes numerous policies that it might implement, the department that's responsible for implementation, and then maybe other departments that would assist in that implementation, and then a schedule for the implementation of the policy or the implementation of the program. And I should stop here and say that we try to minimize or limit the number of policies and programs so that this document at the end reflects really what are your priorities and issues and ideas for the community. The general plan, because it's so comprehensive and deals with so many issues, can sometimes be a dumping ground for good or maybe modest ideas. You put it in the general plan and you documented it. But if you build up too many policies and too many programs, it becomes difficult to implement and too full of kind of maybe even superfluous things. So we try to be conservative with the number of policies and programs that we add. And as you read through this element and other elements, keep that in mind. Is this something you really want to do? Is this something that's important to the city, or is it something that we can hold for another time? So just an observation about how we approach the structure of the general plan. So specifically about the hazards and safety element, it has several goal sections. There's a goal for each one of these topics that you see on the screen: emergency preparedness, seismic hazards, and so on. And under each one of those goals will be a series of policies. And then at the end of the element will be the implementation programs. So where do the policies come from? The end goals. We start with your existing plan and work with staff to audit the plan to identify what policies and programs are still relevant and should stay unchanged, which are relevant that maybe need revised or modified, and which are completed or no longer relevant, and those are taken out. We add new sections, new topics and new sections based on changes in state law or just changes in your priorities as a city. So we've added new sections on emergency preparedness and public health. And as we all know, there have been a lot of changes related to fire safety and hazards and flooding. And so there you will find a number of policies and programs related to that. Let me go back here. There was one thing I wanted to note about the policies. You'll see at the end of this policy, it says source new policy. So that means that that's something new that we've introduced into the plan. If we've carried over an existing policy, the source will identify what that existing policy number is. If we've carried over an existing policy or program and modified it, then it will just describe it as by the policy or program number and then say modified. So you can track which policies and programs from your current general plan have stayed or been modified and which are new policies. When the plan is adopted, we remove these source tags so they're only for use during the review of the draft plan. Okay, so this is just a summary of some of the policies that have been added to respond to changes in state law in terms of, as I mentioned before, fire safety. There's an increased emphasis on interjurisdictional coordination. Hazard mitigation plan is a major source for that. And of course, water conservation, stormwater and floodplain impacts have been changes in all of that. So for your discussion, we have raised several questions, and I don't know if you want to just go through these and then come back to this, or so that you can just kind of see what we're looking for from your direction, or if you want to stop and talk about it. But my inclination is to just go through here, see what things we're interested in hearing from you as a part of your review, and in terms of refining the policy document in general and this element specifically. So if that works for you, I'll just run through this.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. So the obvious first big question is, do the goals reflect your expectations? Many of these are carryover from your current plans, some are new. Are they still current? Did we miss any goal topic? Is there some issues that are missing that we need to add? Or are the goals, do they need to be refined? So that's a first kind of overarching issue. And then the second major question is, are the goals or the policies and programs sufficient for Pleasant Hill? Any need to be removed or modified? Do we need to add more? So this is kind of, we did this working with staff as an initial take on the existing plan. Now it's your turn to kind of take your own look at what we've come up with and give us some direction on whether or not there needs to be those changes. And then, are the programs clear and appropriate? Is it do you see some things that we've missed that we need to add some programs? Or more likely, are there some things in there that you're just don't think are necessary to continue? Most of the programs have financing implications, and some have implications for responsibilities for a range of city departments. You'll know, I should make one observation, and that's that the implementation programs, we only have programs that the city can implement. So if you would like Caltrans to take some action in your city, it won't show up in your implementation programs because you don't have any control over the Caltrans actions. You may have a policy that says coordinate with Caltrans to accomplish a certain objective, but all the programs are related to what the city can accomplish, and it has budgeting implications for you over a period of time. Some programs would be near term and some would be longer term, and a few would be ongoing. So we've just highlighted what some issues that we know are of concern to you, the decision makers, and so we wanted to just kind of call these out as areas for special focus in terms of flooding policies, noise. We know noise is a significant issue in Pleasant Hill, and then public health emergencies, which has some obvious new challenges, and so we do address that fairly extensively in the element. So that's the end of my overview. I'd be happy to go back to some of those slides if you want. If you want to take public comment here, we can pause for that, or go on to council or GPAC discussion.
Let's, if it's all right, why don't we just go ahead with our discussion, and then that might, if we have public comment, at least prompt some. If there's no objection, I have just one comment, sort of. I really like what I see. I think this is really, really good. The only thing that stood out to me as I went through it was, I mean, we reference being part of the, working with the county as part of their hazards management plan and their response plans. But given our proximity to all of the refineries that are north of us, and there are several, I don't see any mention of that. And I see that as a hazardous material hazards, but also a health hazard, given what's been experienced, at least at the Chevron refinery in Richmond. I don't know how we would not be impacted if there were not some chemical release and or significant fire again at one of the refineries just to the north of us, because they're within that, what, 3 mile to 5 mile radius. So somewhere in this, should we mention that as a hazard?
We could. I mean, this is a good example of an issue that you are affected by, but have little control over, right? And so the question is how you would want to address that in your general plan. And we have policies in there that talk about coordination with other jurisdictions, the county and neighboring cities and other agencies and organizations. If you have some specific ideas about how we could be more precise and more surgical in that, we can maybe try to craft some revised policies or a new policy. Maybe it's a program to bring the jurisdictions closer together to deal with some of those issues. Maybe it's a hazard response issue, but this is a really good example of a subject that's hard to address effectively in the general plan.
Is it more of our reaction to communication of those issues and our reaction to it? Because as Jim said, we have no really control over it, but how we react to it and how it's communicated to us that there is potentially a problem.
Well, I just, when reading the document, I don't know that it needs a specific policy or goal. I think it just needs to be noted in there that we recognize it as a hazard. We talk about hazardous material spills potential based on transportation on the 680 corridor. And 29 years in law enforcement, a lot of that in traffic, dealing with hazmat training and some of the other things. I see the potential is there, but I see a broader impact coming out of the refinery if we were to have an incident there. And it might be, treat it like a 100-year flood. It's only going to happen once every 100 years. But I think if we just call it out and recognize it as a hazard in the narrative, lets us know that we've got our finger on the pulse. And then I think our continued coordination with county, county programs and working together like we do when it comes to the work we do with the county and other agencies beyond our control, it's already there. So I think it's just more of recognizing it as a potential hazard in the narrative of the document.
Yeah, I mean, we have narratives at the beginning of the element and then at the beginning of each goal statement. And so maybe what we do is a goal statement that relates to addressing hazards like that. We can expand that discussion to acknowledge this issue and maybe revisit the coordination related goals and program to maybe add some language in there that underscores that issue a little bit more. So sure. Yeah. I don't think it's that significant that it would be a lot of work just to call it out and to highlight it. Yeah.
That was the only thing in this whole thing that when I tried to assess Pleasant Hill as far as hazards that I think was missed at all, and that's minimal when it really came down to it.
Yeah, I think on the hazard side, I agree with you. The question I had on the safety side was more of some of the safety issues we've been having to deal with. Obviously, the COVID-19 situation is important, but our neighboring cities have been dealing a little bit more with the looting and not so peaceful protests. Is that something that we have to address here, or is that somewhere else in our community or other sections of the general plan that we have to think about that safety aspect of the residents of Pleasant Hill?
Yeah, maybe more appropriate in another element.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to raise it because I just want to make sure it's touched on somewhere. So if it's not touched in here from a safety element, where that's touched upon, I just want to make sure that somewhere in this document we address that issue, because while we all hope that that sort of goes away over time, it may not. And if it's not going to, we need to make sure that we address it in this document somewhere.
Yeah. Hi, Brent.
Hey, Brent.
Hey.
Yeah, it's really more of a social equity issue, right?
Yep.
I mean, there's a safety aspect, there's a social equity aspect, and we are dealing with that in some other communities for sure.
Yeah, and it's not, we have some of it here in Pleasant Hill. I wouldn't say as much as some of our neighboring cities do, but it does spill over. And so it's not necessarily, I'm not sure if it's necessarily solely social equity. It's a it can relate to social equity. The safety factor can relate to protest related to social equity, but I'm not sure the social equity is what's causing the safety issue, right? It's the action taken. And so I just want us to think about where it's appropriate to address that safety aspect.
Okay,
Yeah, so if you put it in a little broader or a little narrower terms, so dealing with civil disobedience. And, for example, I know that our PD participates with the mobile field force, which is the county group of officers that respond to acts of civil disobedience and other incidents, where they get additional training and participation. It's a mutual aid type arrangement. So, we would have policies and goals, and we already do, where those would fit. But it does have to be addressed. And again, it covers both the public safety side and the social equity and the diversity of our community.
Brent, can you think of another element other than the safety element that we would address that issue?
It came in midstream, so I'm not sure what you're discussing.
We were talking about any goals that have been missed in the hazards and safety element. And I was mentioning some of the safety factors related to recent occurrences of civil disobedience, rioting, looting, peaceful protest turning into something not so peaceful. And where do we address that aspect of safety in our planning document?
Well, the only other place that law enforcement is discussed would be at public facilities, but that's based on the actual law enforcement department and how they function and integrate with the city. Jim, I'm assuming it would be in this element is where that would go.
Yeah.
Well, and does it need to be in the general plan, or does it just need to be something that we as a city do and implement in whatever plan?
It could be in the implementation aspect of this element, not necessarily in the policies, but I think it's got to be addressed somewhere. And it doesn't have to be solved tonight, but I just put it out for you guys to think about where it's appropriate to maybe be addressed. It doesn't, certainly the safety of our residents is an important piece of any type of long-term plan for the city, whether it be ongoing just criminal activity, as you said, with the police related, or some more civil disobedience and social unrest that's causing some of that. So I just think we need to think about it and where that might be included in here.
Are you thinking that it would be an overarching goal and policy, or are you envisioning some program that would be instituted?
Well, I was looking at some of the implementation pieces and, the emergency plans and things like that. And so it may be factored into those aspects of the plan. So it doesn't, I'm not necessarily thinking of an overarching policy or goal, but somewhere where it's addressed in our emergency plan or some of those implementation pieces, how we might address those.
It might be as simple as modifying a policy to specifically call that out, and in the program adding that in.
Yeah, might just be that. Right now we've had, a bit of that, fortunately for us, more in our neighboring cities, but that doesn't say it doesn't spill over at times into Pleasant Hill, and we need to be, thoughtful about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have some other comments regarding the implementation piece. I don't know if you want to touch upon that later or.
No, now it's good. Sure.
Okay, so one of the things, we talk about some broad implementation pieces, and then there was a, piece on encouraging personal responsibility for keeping 2 weeks of supplies and so on and so forth. One of the interesting things I participated in several years ago was a neighborhood group where we identified neighbors that might need help from their homes because they are disabled, or who in the neighborhood might have some medical training, or who might know how to turn off your gas valves or your water valves in the case of an emergency. And I thought it was an excellent idea and really made a ton of sense. And this community is so neighborhood driven that I thought it would be helpful to expand that sort of personal responsibility of keeping 2 weeks of supplies in your house to try to encourage some sort of neighborhood action plans in the event of emergency. We have our lovely CERT group, which is great, but this is really more, oh my gosh, I better run up the street and see if so-and-so is okay because they're unable to get out of their house. Or my husband, who has every tool under the sun in the garage, can, you know, go and fix whatever needs to be fixed somewhere. To know who to go to, we have a doctor up the street. You know, just having that neighborhood sense can really solve some of these problems. I thought it might be something worthwhile including in our implementation piece.
Would you see that as the city's role as providing maybe a support for doing that, maybe a plan that interested neighbors could take and implement
Yeah,
themselves?
something similar to what we do for neighborhood watches. You know, our police department helps, you know, coordinate neighborhood watch groups. It would be something similar to that, whether it be done through our CERT group or done through the police department or something like that. But it would be sort of help facilitate, I think.
So the city's role could be to help facilitate that in terms of providing the underlying information and approach, but the city wouldn't actually go out and
No.
for it. Yeah. Okay.
Right, no.
Great.
Could
Anyway,
could that just be incorporated under that household preparedness?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking,
Implementation
like just expand that household / neighborhood, you know,
Yeah.
type thing. That's what I was thinking.
Sure.
And then the other one I know that will come up, and this is a minor detail, but in the noise one, you're gonna have to add leaf blowers in there.
I
agree.
Oh,
I'm just saying, you know, if there's anything we get on noise complaints more than anything, it's leaf blowers.
I'm
So-
Yeah, on
gonna,
every side of my house. I agree.
Yeah.
weed
so,
eaters are next.
Is the direction to move toward
Banning.
you know, implementing banning certain equipment that is over certain decibel?
Well, there's certainly been a big push. I know we've had this push before here.
Okay.
And it's not that I don't support it. The question comes up is, how do you help the gardeners whose equipment this is get electric leaf blowers instead of the gas, very noisy leaf blowers? Because to ban that and all of a sudden have all these gardeners have to go out and fork out money for potentially expensive equipment for them, it just is a slight hiccup. So, you know, there's some process in there, but that's, I mean, Ken, when did we had this discussion sometime before about that subject? And I don't remember when it was, but it came up, it's come up more recently. Everybody being at home with COVID is hearing all the leaf blowers. And so we are hearing a lot about it, and rightfully so, I understand that, but it's something we have to think about in context of noise. It's just, you know, I looked down the list and I thought, God, how do we miss leaf blowers in the grand scheme of things here? Because that's probably the biggest complaint we get.
I keep burying my head in the sand because technology is changing and now they're battery operated ones. And, you know, the hope is that they just kind of evolve into that one breaks.
Those diesel ones, I mean, the gas ones last a long time. So if you're waiting for them to die to buy a new version, anyway.
I'm with you.
It's a small technical piece of it.
Yeah.
But in the list of all the things we address in noise, that one probably has to come in there.
So I guess my next question on that particular topic is how far are you looking to take it? Are you looking for a policy that discusses, you know, reducing the use of that or encouraging the reduction of use? Or do you want to go as far as even having a program that studies banning it? Or how far does this want to go?
I didn't have the answer for that, Brent. I just wanted to bring it up. I didn't actually have the answer for that.
So including leaf blowers, we can definitely do that, but to what extent?
Yeah.
I was concerned because we targeted some really specific areas, Contra Costa Boulevard and North Main, which I didn't know we had a noise problem there. So that's in there. And I'm thinking, in the grand scheme of things, when I hear complaints about noise,
Mhm.
that one I never hear about. Yet I hear about leaf blowers all the time. So
Okay.
when I look at implementation and I look at that one, I'm thinking I'd scratch that one in a heartbeat and look at a thing, leaf blowers, because that is a
What
bigger
about,
issue in my mind in the city.
what about looking in Program R, noise in residential areas? We mentioned, garbage and recycling pickup, parking lot vacuuming,
Mhm.
landscape equipment.
Mhm.
Yeah, that
Don't
works.
call out at leaf blowers at all.
Yeah, because
but-
it could be lawn mowers as well.
It could be any 2-cycle nightmare, or is it a
Correct.
4-cycle? Oh, it's a
It's 2-cycle.
2-stroke, yeah.
It's 2-stroke, yeah.
Just throw landscape equipment in there,
Okay.
and then we could do whatever we choose to do in 2025 and beyond, when I'm gone.
So is that why you chose
Wow,
program
that is
R?
just wrong.
No, it's just such a challenging thing. I mean, you're impacting a whole lot of small business owners
Yeah.
that, they're
Mhm.
going to have to go out and spend a lot of money, or they're going to cut back in their business, and they're just not going to do it in Pleasant Hill. So,
And it's not like they only do business in Pleasant Hill. It's where they can get some help
Right.
from the city to replace the leaf blower. I mean, is Pleasant Hill going to pay for leaf blowers for everyone in East Bay?
yeah.
Right.
Do we have a buyback program?
Oh, God.
And we're talking about leaf blowers. We're not, that implementing program R talks about a specific time frame. But for these leaf blowers, we're talking about, we're getting the complaints all day. And so
Right.
it's more broad than just the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Right.
time
This is and some of it's COVID related because people are home all day now and they're hearing it more than if they were, at their workspace. But it's been a topic that I think just has to be pointed out here. I know it may be, hopefully over time, it will evolve into battery and electric operated and be much quieter, but still should be part of it.
So, okay, go
Technology's
back.
there. It's just cost.
Go back to R, and what if you took that 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. out of there and just say during restricted times? And we would deal with garbage trucks and recycling trucks one way. We might deal with landscaping equipment a different way. It would leave it open for the city to pick and choose what and when
Mm-hmm.
we want to limit or ban or restrict, or however we want to go about it. Because if we were to say, we were to work with our partner at Republic Services and they're to say, look, we've got to start at 6 or we'll never get this done by 8. So either way, we're just not going to be able to make it work. And I don't know if that's factual or not, but if we aren't somewhat flexible to be able to work with some of our partners, then we're really, we're hamstringing ourselves. In some
By hard
respect.
coding 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
I just
Is
don't
the
want
7
somebody.
p.m. to 7 a.m. Is that currently in your noise ordinance now?
I don't think so.
I don't think so,
I think
because
it's
my
a
garbage
10 I
truck
think
comes
we've
at
got a 10
6:30.
We got a 10 p.m. noise ordinance, don't we? At 10 p.m.
I
Jim?
think the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I think that's taken from construction hours, but
Yeah.
let me
Oh.
take a quick look.
Probably.
So you're thinking to generalize that more, remove the
Yeah.
time reference and
And make it flexible for us to pick and choose depending on activity or equipment or those
Yeah.
types of things.
It could be weekends for certain things and weekdays for, weekday mornings for others. Just, I think Ken's point is valid. Just got to be more flexible in that time frame.
To enforce this, we're going to have to specify at some point in one of our ordinances.
Yep.
So we could have it generalized in this element, but then go down to the more specifics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
My power went out for a while and my modem was down, so I missed some of the conversation, but I think you're looking at R under noise, and I like Ken's comment about adding landscape equipment to that.
That was my comment.
Or Sue's comment. Ken told me he did it.
Yeah, I did do it. She led me there, though. She held my hand all the way there.
I said leaf blower. I said leaf blowers. He expanded to landscape equipment.
But I do like that.
Did I tell you my leaf blower experience?
Uh-oh.
I have a cordless battery operated leaf blower. It cost about $200. I had to buy 2 extra batteries. So I have 3 batteries, each cost $100.
Oh,
Each lasts about 20 minutes.
oh,
Really?
So,
okay. That may not be a good idea then.
well, I mean, I think that technology probably will change over time and you'll have more powerful or batteries that hold longer charges. But it's good for me with the few trees I have. And but if I go out and blow leaves, I don't bother my neighbors. But it is it probably for this time is going to be impractical for somebody who's doing these all day.
All day long. Yeah.
Unless you have a battery supplement program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, so I mean it's a dilemma many communities have. Many places.
Yeah. I'm sure we're not the only ones on this one.
Yeah.
the corded leaf blowers work very well, but they're not usable everywhere at a
Right.
residence.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
a plug in front of my house. I use a corded leaf blower. It's
Hey, I
stronger
used to
than
rake
battery.
leaves. What happened to the good old rake concept? Sorry.
We've advanced from
I ain't
the
got
year
I was, on the
100.
I was on the East Coast where there were lots of leaves.
Well, Sue, let me ask you. You said you used to rake leaves. Do you still do that?
No, I luckily have a gardener that uses a leaf blower. I'm happy to admit that. I'm sorry, but I actually got to stop in high school because I became allergic to the mold created from wet leaves.
Yeah, I'm allergic to yard work too.
Yeah, well, that too, but I had it out there. Okay.
We
All
still
right, so
rake our
we
leaves.
digress there badly.
So
So does
are
your
we-
gardener have an electric leaf blower?
No, he doesn't. I know. I gotta work on that myself, but he doesn't show up at 7 a.m. either.
Right.
No, he's 2 blocks over.
Yeah, right. So
So
just a
we're on,
couple other,
just real quick, are we in consensus on amending R? Pretty much, Brent, you got where we're,
Can you
Cool.
pull that up again, please?
pull what up?
Oh wait, I forgot I was looking at it on my second screen. I've had a whole day of Zoom meetings. In fact, I had a Zoom meeting on doing Zoom meetings today.
Oh. Okay, Sue, sorry, I got this.
clearly you didn't pay attention then, Chadwick.
I was the host.
Okay, we're losing control here. So a couple of the other ones. P, noise mitigation along Contra Costa Boulevard, North Main, and this dialogue with Caltrans on Walnut Creek to Highway 242. Is this something that was in our old plan that has just moved into the new plan? Because not really understanding why those 2 specific sections are picked out.
Are you saying for P and Q?
Yes.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the process, we had a general plan audit, and the general plan audit extracted every goal, policy, and program, and then put it into an Excel table. And city staff went through the general plan audit and flagged which ones to keep, maintain, or modify. These 2 programs had no marker, which typically means move them forward, and then the GPAC takes a look at them as the first round of review, and the GPAC can determine whether we want those to stay.
So I'm thinking Contra Costa Boulevard, North Main can probably go. I'm not sure there's anything significant going on there noise-wise to require that to stay. The Walnut Creek City Limit Highway 2242 resurface all concrete roads. I mean, this is probably ongoing, but we have so much construction going on from 242 to Walnut Creek over the next 10, 15 years between all the Innovate 680 and the 4 interchange and ramps and express lanes. I'm not sure that this is really going to work for at least 10 years.
We got 20 years to work on it.
I know, but I'm not sure at the end of 10 years where we're going to be at that point.
Well,
I mean, I sit on the Innovate 680, policy committee, and what they're planning on doing between ramps and signalizing ramps and expanding and putting in express lanes, those projects are going to stretch for a good potentially 20 years.
right, but doesn't Caltrans have their own resurfacing schedule like we do with our street
But is
resurfacing
it
program?
really worth calling out here? I mean,
No, it just lets people know that we're paying attention to it and that it's on our wish list. That and I'm assuming from this, we're talking concrete as opposed to asphalt roadway. And
this is just meant to reduce vehicle noise.
Right. I'm assuming that the nature of the road surface impacts noise, is the way I'm reading this.
Correct.
Well, but that's,
So if you're talking asphalt concrete as opposed to cement roadway, then I could see that.
I just don't think this rises to the inclusion in this element. I mean, there's going to be so much work being done on the next 10 to 20 years to just encourage Caltrans to repave the concrete roads to keep the noise level down when everything else is going to be going on that road.
Let me ask you a big what if.
All right.
What if in their cycle of resurfacing program, like I said, it's different than a new project.
Right.
Nothing, it's just part of their resurfacing program. If we
Right.
take it off our list, staff doesn't push them to go, hey, move us up in your cycle or get it done. And so if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
My
But if
bet
it's
is
still on our
staff
wish
always asks, my bet staff always asks, if they're repaving, our staff
No.
always asks to have our section redone, regardless.
Yeah, I just think it's neutral. I don't see any hazard in leaving it in there or any reason to call it out.
I just don't think it's a big enough item to call out in the general plan for the next, to me, we're going to have much more noise on the construction of express lanes, the expansion of that road, the expansion of, the redoing of 4, the new ramps with new signal lights in, to worry about the concrete being repaved versus all that other noise.
All that other noise, we don't have impact over. All we can do is hope that CEQA
Well, we don't
calls
have
out
impact on
mitigation
this either.
efforts.
Well, we don't have impact on this either, right? It's Caltrans.
No, but we can always ask them, right? We can always lobby.
We can ask, we sit on Transpac and CCTA as well.
The word is lobby, is all I'm looking at.
All right, I just don't think it's that relevant. Come on, guys, speak up, the rest of you. It's just Ken and I arguing amongst ourselves.
I'm inclined to leave it
We do
in.
that all the time.
I'm inclined to leave it in, but I'm not sure lobby is the right word. I don't have another word
I don't
in mind.
Pressure?
encourage.
Ask nicely.
Yeah, I was going to say
And please.
encourage.
Well, I was thinking too, they just redid that section, over in Brentwood, and they used that new asphalt that's quieter than normal. I've stood there. Like, if they're going to be near us, I want to talk to them and say, hey, put that new stuff in that Brentwood just got, because I live 3 streets out from the freeway and I would benefit from that new asphalt.
Yeah.
So then it's not concrete anyway. So there we go. We have a problem anyway.
Put the asphalt over it, because the problem is when you're driving on concrete versus asphalt, the asphalt, I think, is supposed to absorb the noise better, right? So if you're putting in the new specially designed asphalt that absorbs even more noise, like, yes, please put as much of that in as possible over the concrete, whatever.
If that program was to stay, would it be better fit as an ongoing program and not have a time limit?
Yes.
I would broaden it for, rather than being specific, Walnut Creek city limit to 242. I mean, that's really just.
Roads, but it's all concrete roads between Walnut Creek city limits and 242.
Do we
So it's
really have
anything
a,
that's concrete.
where are we getting noise complaints about 680?
I think this is coming from staff knowing the nature of the beast.
Knowing they want it repaved, but this really isn't
No,
a
I'm not.
noise thing.
knowing that the nature of the roadway surface causes greater noise.
You can come sit in my backyard in here, 680.
I sit in my backyard and just hear Taylor Boulevard. So I just, it's hard for me just to limit that. But I'm fine leaving it in. I just think it's very particular, very specific, and not something that I have never even heard this concern until I read this.
I would consider moving it to just ongoing. And it could be work with Caltrans, encourage Caltrans, a little less. I mean, yeah.
Well, I think there was a thought there that it might be warranted to take these two and not necessarily be so specific and broaden it to say something to the effect of, looking at noise concerns related to roadway improvements or something that broadens it, so it's not just 242 and Contra Costa Boulevard.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I like that. Broaden it to more of that.
That way Taylor Boulevard's a little quieter too.
Taylor Boulevard. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chadwick. But I mean, it could be Pleasant Hill Road. Pleasant Hill Road has gotten quite busy. Grayson as well. I mean, Contra Costa Boulevard is very busy these days. Luckily, a lot of it's been redone. But, I like your idea of just broadening that a little bit more.
I like road diets. So
science is there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
So here's the thing though, in looking at P and Q, they're two different things to me. One is an analysis that we have control over, and it's for us to formulate methods to either rectify any unacceptable noise. And then Q is to encourage Caltrans to do something that impacts us. So I do see them as two things. I don't see how you can blend them together.
It's not always Caltrans. It could be CCTA. It could be, it's not.
Caltrans has to do the work, and Caltrans has to put the project together, right? Because we as a city can't go to CCTA and say, can we resurface Caltrans roads? We'd like your money.
No,
they're not going to happen.
The financing may come from CCTA.
Right. But Caltrans has to be the lead agency who's going to ask for and do the work. And that's why it has to fall on those roadways. It's going to be Caltrans. Those are areas that they're on control of. We don't have any control of. So I see them as two separate things. One the city can do, one Caltrans has to do. And all we can do with Caltrans is ask. So I don't know how you can put them together as one. Sorry, Troy.
It's going to be one of those ones we agree to disagree on.
So the previous note I had was to eliminate P. Is that what we're looking to do? And maintain Q, but broaden Q and make it ongoing?
I would just, on Q, all I would say is change lobby, make it ongoing.
And eliminate P.
If you want to, I think P is a doable. That's just conduct an analysis of noise, and then how do we rectify them if we find unacceptable noise level.
But why only there?
Evidently, that's where staff has received the complaint.
No, this was from our last general plan. This was a carryover.
20 years ago, they got complaints.
Yeah, so have you heard a complaint from that in the last 20 years or last, whatever?
Chadwick, you live down there. How is it?
Contra Costa is all right. You can't hear Contra Costa over 680.
Okay. Then I'm good with P. P can go.
P can go. All right, we got an agreement on P eliminated.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. We're making big progress here.
Engineering will thank you.
Yeah.
So are we changing the word lobby to encourage or some other word?
To encourage.
Yeah. Encourage?
Ask nicely.
Beg and plead.
That's what it will end up being.
Okay.
Anything else, Sue?
And I've stirred up enough trouble
All
tonight.
right.
No, if you really, if you have any other concerns, it'd be,
No, those were my primary points. I really like the neighborhood thing that I was talking about earlier.
yeah.
And then those two were so specific in the implementation that I just wanted to address that in a broader fashion. The other thing, and this isn't really necessarily something for what's in here, but the comprehensive emergency management plan, I would love for city council to be a little bit more involved in that. Only because, if phone calls start happening because things get screwed up, a lot of them are coming to us. And I think it's important for us to have a little bit more involvement in some of those drills or in the plan. That's my only other comment on the implementation section.
Yeah, we certainly could arrange that for when we have some of those for sure.
Yeah.
I have some
Chadwick?
questions. Yeah, in regards to flooding, where did you all get that data for the 6.7 to 8.2 inches increase by 2045?
I'm gonna have to look back. So the data that the introductions to each of these sections actually comes from the existing conditions and trends workbook.
Okay.
That was done about a year and a half ago. I can pull it up and.
That's that big one that I have a hard copy of. Well, I'm wondering too, it seems like there's not a whole lot in that section, and I'm just curious on flooding. Just trying to scroll back down. Is it really? It's not watershed. Data on low-lying areas. I'm just curious because, flood-prone areas. So as far as improvement projects go, and maybe this ties into the same issue that we had with noise, we can only focus on what we have control over.
Mm-hmm.
One of the issues, so I live in a 100-year floodplain. I'm over near where the new library project is, for instance. Neighbors have told me, for instance, that there was a plan to at one point put, I think, flood basin there that was going to be like soccer fields that could absorb the water, but that didn't happen. I don't know what the new plan is for the northern part of the library development, if that's actually going to retain enough water to have a measurable distance. But looking at what's causing the flood in the first place and talking to flood surveyors and engineers, it really seems like a certain local agency may not be keeping their part of the canals as clear as they should be, and that's entirely outside of the city's control. Can we encourage them to maybe dredge the channels to do the work that they need to be doing that is part of the established FEMA guidelines that all of us agreed to when this was set up 30, 40 years ago, probably before I was even born?
Mm-hmm.
It's affecting me. It's affecting people who've lived in my neighborhood for 50 years.
So, let me touch on a couple of things, and then June can probably address some of this stuff better. The city has spent quite a bit of time working on cleaning up the canals so they flow better, and I think that has been fairly effective. The number of floods we've had in recent years is much reduced, so I think that's very helpful.
And the city-owned ones, yes.
No, even the privately owned, I'm not saying other agencies, but the privately owned, because we're pretty good about making sure that individual homes that back up onto canals have responsibility for that as well. So, and we've had to work with some agencies as well to make sure they got their stuff done without going into detail, right? With respect to the new library segment, so this discussion on a flood detention basin for years has gotten misconstrued forever. So the Army Corps of Engineers has been in 3 times to study that area where the new library is being built, or the northern section of it.
Yeah.
To look into a flood detention basin. 3 times it's happened, and 3 times it's been turned down, and the cost of such a flood detention basin was like $38 million. And there was no federal money coming. So that was never going to happen, and it's been discussed over and over again. what's happening with the new library and the ball fields is the ball fields for Rec and Park will be a little bit lower than where the land currently is. That land has been shifted over and the library a little bit raised. And there is work being done on the canal so that in a flood situation, in an extreme rain situation, this soccer field would get flooded or the baseball fields would get flooded. How much that actually helps the neighboring areas, I couldn't tell you for sure, but there's quite a bit of work. And that section of canal used to be managed by the school district and now will be managed by city and Rec and Park. So that section will be better maintained.
That's interesting because like that section, so the section I'm thinking of actually starts after the library, kind of to the north where Astrid is, where you've got, I mean, part of it looks a little bit of collapse. You can see trees that have washed into it. So is that now going to be the city's responsibility? I thought it was county, the flood control district.
So north of the library would be the school.
There's a school.
Middle school, and then after the middle school,
it's a flood control district.
There's property that's there that's owned by the flood control district, technically owned by the county.
Yeah.
That's the flood control that's off Crescent, right? That backs up to this.
Flood
control?
Where Astrid and Cleveland come together.
Cleveland.
Right, and so
Backs
that's
up to the
at the
middle
corner where the school ends as well.
Where the school ends. And there's that big open field that at some point was bought out by the flood control district. So is that going to be managed by the city, or is that still going to be?
No, that's still county flood control.
So that's one of the concerns. Is it seems like a lot of the other parts of the city, like you said, Sue, the city's doing a great job of clearing stuff up, but when stuff backs up there, it doesn't matter how clean the city's canals are, the water is going to go. I've seen water coming up out of the storm drains on Astrid.
And I don't know where the status of the flood control, it was the one that had worked with the Army Corps of Engineers and determined that wasn't possible. And they had been collecting fees over quite a period of time that went into a bucket to potentially go to pay for that detention basin. When that wasn't really doable and we knew we weren't getting federal funds, they have now determined some project areas to alleviate some of that flooding. And Troy, June, do you know where, I know there's one in Pleasant Hill that's money is supposed to go toward. Do you know where that is?
I believe it's, I'm sorry, Troy, do you know? Because I think I thought it was partly, mostly Walnut Creek.
Yeah.
And my question's much more basic. It's how do we get them to clean out the canal?
So do you add another,
Encourage?
Another encourage, or do you expand on what I'm looking at as HNS 5.1?
I mean,
what damage potential reduction? Do you go into a little more detail, or do you go down further into the implementation?
I like the encourage. It's just, I go out there, I go on a run, and I can see that part of the canal. You've got maybe 40% of the original capacity left because there's so much between trash, there's sediment, you got parts of it, the cement's caved in. These are fairly easy fixes. I mean, heck, if we had a motivated group of city volunteers with a Bobcat, we could probably do it. But
so maybe their insurance would let you.
Creek, environmental.
So maybe it has to be a broad plan on ensuring the canal, no matter where it is, because ownership changes, things like that. Ensuring that the canals are maintained in an appropriate fashion, clean of debris, blah, 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 something of that sort, regardless of just pointing out that one segment. But I think we need to make sure that we have a program in place to ensure that throughout Pleasant Hill and the canals.
And Chadwick, just on a side note unrelated to, but when you're jogging, if you can take some photographs, send them to me and I'll have staff identify where it is. The property ownership things out there is so crazy.
I've looked it all up. I mean, that's what I do. It's all flood control districts. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's why I know it's not the city's fault.
Yeah.
But don't
But
you
you
work
don't-
for the county, Chadwick?
No. One of the few places that we don't do work for.
So is the direction from GPAC to include a policy that's on cleaning up the channels?
Yeah, making sure the canals are,
Having
yeah.
a program associated with it, or just a policy?
Well,
Time and staff for a program.
We already
as well.
have the program,
We already-
really.
yeah, and we just have to
Mhm.
make sure we still continue to do that because we have a program in place, right, to
We
ensure that
hold-
people's ownership of their canals is maintained.
Yeah, we hold the homeowners accountable for if they're creekside property owners and they own the creek, we hold them accountable for keeping it clear of debris and from stuff flowing downstream.
Yeah.
Which, in all honesty, there's no reason we cannot treat the county the same way we treat our residents, in that if we have to abate it for you, you're gonna get a bill.
Well, did we get the library transfer completed?
It's done. It's done. Yeah.
Done.
Oh my God.
So-
Chadwick.
So we could include a policy on that. I want to make sure I get the terminology right. Are they called canals? Are they flood channels? What are they called?
They're called canals.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Or do we call them watershed in general? I mean, just any flood runoff pathway.
Well, the problem is, how deep do you want to take that? Because then you've got the culverts on Astrid. I mean, how it's. I'm just thinking like a local example, but I've seen other parts in the city where like the city is taking care of it. And it's like, wow, that's a great looking canal. I'm sure it works like it should.
Well, we
I think
didn't
it's-
answer.
Yeah, I think it's canals though.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Chadwick, anything else?
The flood thing just kind of caught my eye. I was looking at the high fire threat district stuff too, just because I do a lot of work with that, but I don't have any comments on that.
I sat on that South Pleasant Hill Flood Task Force for probably 3 years before we disbanded.
If y'all want to go kayaking this winter, just wait for the next big storm.
I was gonna
Come
go
to the meeting.
skimboarding on the library site, but now we got a library.
No can do.
Any other areas to touch on?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Alan.
I've noticed the last few months in the area where I live, a lot of the older trees are starting to die, and they die quickly. Some of the old pines and firs. My next door neighbors on two sides have taken them out, and I've noticed a huge one on Oak Park. And I know under the wildfire, we've got the homeowner education and defensible space inspections, but these could just fall over at some time. Do we have any way that we deal with these?
You mean with dead trees on private property?
Yeah, because some of these could fall onto Oak Park and take wires and things with them.
Yeah, I'll let Troy take that. We do notify people if we know that a tree is in bad shape. Troy, do you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, if it's reported to us and it is clearly dead, we will try and just let the property owner know that, hey, you've got a dead tree, you might want to take a look at it. We don't actively patrol the streets, especially for private properties looking for dead trees, but if it's brought to our attention, we do follow up.
Do you have any idea whether the inspection for defensible space would have any authority to deal with that, the fire department?
Well, fire department, they get involved in weeds and things like that. I know people have reported dead trees to the fire department. I don't know if they've had much luck or not. Do you, Troy?
I know fire department only looks at big properties for weeds, and my guess is, although we haven't had the fire department reach out to us and say, hey, you've got a dead tree, you need to take a look at it. Well, it's mostly they send weed complaints to us if it's a smaller property than what they look at.
Yeah, common sense would tell me the homeowner would take it down, but some of these have been around for a while, so I just wanted to ask if there's anything we can do about it.
Well,
Yeah,
and I think PG&E has to look at it too, because it takes down their wires, right?
I was gonna say,
I'm just saying.
yeah. And we're,
Pete-
we can't actually go on private property without a warrant. So we're kind of limited when it's on private property. The fire department, at least related to weeds, certainly has a lot more legal authority than we have in terms of, has fire hazards on private property. But, we certainly try to get them involved where we can. So.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Shall we open it to public comment? So public's welcome to call in. The number is 925-671-5285. If you'd like to comment on this specific item, which is the health and safety element. Larry, do we have any callers?
We do, sir. Please hold on 1 second while I transfer it over.
Caller, are you there?
One moment, please.
Okay. I should have known better.
In there as well. They have a 50-year plan, and conveyance can be increased with proper creek restoration as they outline in that 50-year plan. So I think coordination with Contra Costa Flood Control Agency needs to be added there.
Is this Dan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Just you got cut off. We didn't get you from the beginning. So just real quick, if you wouldn't mind starting over and share your name.
Start over. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me turn my speaker on. Okay. Hang on a second. I'm going to start over. So this is Alan Baudet. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Keep going.
Okay. Okay. Couple things I wanted to mention that the nomenclature on the water conveyance that you're talking about is creeks, not canals. East Fork Grayson. I'm talking. East Fork Grayson Creek is labeled over there by the library.
Right.
And so I just wanted to bring that up. And I think that conveyance will be improved with capital improvements to be encouraged in other policies over there. And then, let's see, on flood HS 5.6, I think you mentioned that you need it to comply with state and federal law there, but there's no mention of Contra Costa Flood Control Agency. Do we need to do that? They have a 50-year plan, and conveyance can be greatly increased with proper creek restorations as outlined in that plan. A safety issue that I think that wasn't brought up in wildfire was establishing proper evacuation routes. In many urban areas, like in Santa Rosa, nobody expected them to burn in through big suburban areas, and the roads got clogged in places. So maybe look at wildfire evacuation routes to avoid traffic jams that are deadly. And then in the noise area, 9.10 program R, we support the specific times in this because something needs to be enforceable. Now, in that wording is only mentioned residential areas, but it really needs to be amended to prohibit noise issues in business areas adjacent to residential areas, because most of the noise comes from things like leaf blowers and things like that in the business areas in the early mornings, or deliveries and idling trucks that sit there for an hour to an hour and a half, spewing diesel fumes and very loud noises. 9.10 Program O, we support measurable standards. And then 9.7 on the noise section, HS-7.5, noise restrictions in commercial and industrial developments. Policy states for new development, but it should also be for substantial remodeling. What triggers when, it shouldn't just be for new. If they take half of a shopping center down, would that trigger something? Air quality is a hazard. I think that Ken brought something up that's really important. So policies to coordinate with shelter-in-place plans when there's horrible air quality from wildfires. The refineries was a good example to bring up, but I think wildfires would probably be something we're going to see more often. And let's see, the leaf blowers, trucks issues, I think, is an important one from the noise standpoint, but really commercial centers tend to do it in the early morning, and they are right adjacent to residential areas. So some kind of wording that reflects that is important. We also support the quieter roadways, so the whole discussion on quieter asphalt, especially in 680, things like that is really important. And I think that that's it so far. I would like to know whether or not we're going to have the ability to comment on a further draft, or is this going to go back to, just being decided upon at the next stage. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. No, it would come back to us for us to move it forward to the next step, which would be planning, right? Sorry, Troy, put you on the spot.
No, that's correct. There will be multiple occasions to provide input on this. I mean, that's to go PC and then CC, and whatever, there may be other interim steps that are taken. So there will clearly be other opportunities before this version is necessarily put to bed.
Right.
And just to piggyback off what Troy's saying, so what we do is we take the GPAC recommended comments and modifications tonight, including public comment, and those are instituted into the next draft, which is a clean draft brought back to GPAC, probably not until the January meeting. And then at that point, GPAC will review it and bless it at that meeting, and at that same meeting, we'll review a new element.
And we will
After that, it'll go as a complete package, a complete policy document with all the other elements to Planning Commission toward the end of the process.
So we will take public comment at our next draft of this. We would still take some public comment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're good. Larry, was there any other public comment?
Okay, Mr. Chair, could I add a comment to that? We're preparing a public review draft that once it's blessed by the council, will prepare the EIR on the document.
Right.
And then once the EIR is done, the general plan and the EIR go out for public comment. So there is yet another round at the end to comment on this addition. So there's several opportunities for comment.
Yep. Right. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Larry, was there any other public comment?
There are, please hold on one moment. This one's going to go a lot smoother. Hold on, please.
There's the hold music I've been waiting for all night.
Nice.
Carla, you may speak now.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, this is Linda DeChambeau. Hi, everybody, with Contra Costa County Climate Leaders, also known as 4CL. We were established in 2007. I do want to say I share and concur with the previous speaker. I'd love to know where Alan represents. I just caught his name, but not his association. I have a couple big picture questions on the overall general plan that I probably should have raised earlier, but I'm just a little confused about the division of the general plan update now and how's the city handling the state of California's recommendations on climate change and adding a new element on environmental justice. And wondering if the pieces of plan will all come back together in some timeline, and that there'll be sort of, I imagine, one final update and one final EIR. You can maybe answer that afterwards. But I do have general comments along those same lines regarding tonight's health and safety element. And one you triggered that was about equity is an important piece to providing a blueprint on how Pleasant Hill is going to assure there's no disproportionate health impacts, safety impacts to the community. And it seemed that you were, rather than planning reactively, you were planning reactively the discontent and problems rather than proactively. And I've seen other cities put a lot more in there about a plan of how you will ensure that there is no social injustice to begin with, rather than just how to deal with outbursts. And would encourage you to be proactive and include environmental justice. And also want to talk a little bit about climate is clearly a safety element, perhaps as its own section or bullet point here is what we've seen. Our organization has got links to many general plans as examples on our website, but there's a great opportunity to include it here, and Richmond's one of the ones we really enjoy. Their safety element includes a separate section on natural hazards. And then in that section of natural hazards, they have a finding that says, quote, some environmental hazards in the city are caused by human activity. And from there flows a couple of clear goals on on health and safety that I would encourage you to consider. And one is the risk management of human-caused natural disasters. And the response in their general plan update is to promote a sustainable approach to reduce the impacts of those natural disasters, such as flooding and fire. And another one is to make sure you have land use compatibility to minimize conflicts between the land uses, because the issues you're mentioning about flows and problems, there is a lot more going on with daylighting, protecting wetlands, marshlands, creating urban flood zones, etc. And a lot of that could be addressed by, in your general plan update, specifically requiring a climate action plan, and certainly under air quality, CO2, greenhouse gases. I'm also a scientist, retired from the EPA, is a known hazardous air pollutant. And just overall, would love to know how Pleasant Hill is going to address, the overall impacts of climate, such as severe drought, fire, erosion, flooding, but also heat-related deaths, power outages, especially the medical equipment devices people rely on. Increases in diseases will continue both to humans and to trees, and trees falling and causing fires. And all of these are caused by the climate crisis. So just love to know and encourage you on your safety element to include more proactive and preventative measures, and not just how you will react to the given outcomes. And thank you for mentioning leaf blowers. They do not only generate noise, but they're huge greenhouse gas emissions and impact climate change and the impacts of health and asthma, especially of those people using it. So, and I just want to finally, you should have 2 sets of comments that were signed by my group and a dozen other local organizations that are interested in sustainability, equity, climate. And hopefully you have those and are considering those, and we'd be happy to send them over again. thanks for all your hard work on this, and appreciate your time and attention. Have a great night.
Wonderful. Thank you. Larry, any
We
other?
do have one more call. Please hold on.
Okay.
You may speak, caller.
Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, my name is Wendy Dollop, and I'm a resident of Pleasant Hill. I've been a resident since 1980. First, I'd like to address the fact that the creeks were called canals, when in fact they are not canals. Canals are man-made, and these are natural waterways. They're part of the Walnut Creek watershed, and they actually have names like Murderers Creek and Grayson Creek and Matson Creek. So I think we need to remember that these aren't man-made canals, but they are natural waterways. And some cities even have city council people that come, or at least city representation to the watershed councils and stuff that we talk about these issues at. And I would encourage maybe somebody from Pleasant Hill to attend some of these meetings. They're very informative and interesting, and talk about restoration. The other thing I'd like to talk about as well is that there are noise issues from 680. Ever since they put that flyover nearby the city, the noise issues from 680 are really bad. I mean, if you've ever been over by Freedman's or anything, that freeway is thundering. Even by the new library, when there's an inversion layer and the sound bounces, you can hardly hear yourself talk. So anything that could be done with Caltrans to put on a rubberized surface or something to reduce noise from 680, that would be great. I live in the Poets Corner area, and sometimes the noise is just deafening from the freeway. I don't think I've ever mentioned it because I didn't think there was anything that could be done about it. I know at one time they did put some rubberized surface or something on it that did help with the noise issue because it was so bad after they put that flyover over by the theater. Another issue that I'd like to think would be important on the noise aspect are the idling trucks in neighborhoods. I'd like to see an ordinance where we have something like no truck idling within 50 feet of a house. We have trucks that sit there for half hour, 45 minutes on a neighborhood street, 10, 15 feet from a front door, and the pollution that comes off these trucks and the noise from idling trucks, they're out there for an hour. And I think that needs to be addressed. Some of these commercial areas are right in the neighborhoods, and they're located as close as another residential house would be. The Oak Park Shopping Center is a good example. And I know that there's other ones in the neighborhood too, over by Gregory Gardens that back up, that have trucks that come in and they do street sweeping and vacuuming. There's all kinds of noise regarding commercial areas that do really loud shampooing of rugs. They want to do that in the middle of the night. That backs up 10, 15 feet from a front door or a bedroom. And now when we have these Zoom calls and stuff during the day, sometimes the trucks are so loud you can't even hear the Zoom call. So I think that could be an issue that really needs to be looked at, and not just with new development. But those are just a few of the things I'd like to mention. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. All right, Larry, anybody else?
So loud you can't even hear the Zoom call. So I think that could be.
Larry, were there any other callers? not sure what's happening there. So
I did, if I can, I did want to address one comment
Yeah.
that talked about how the general plan is being laid out, and I believe it was Linda that brought up environmental justice and climate change and adaptation and how that relates and where that's going to be. So this next few elements, specifically the environment element, which is planning on coming to all of you to review in January, includes a section on sustainability, climate change adaptation, air quality, GHG thresholds, and then how Pleasant Hill can adapt to that. So everything that she brought up is covered in that element. I've actually seen an internal draft of it, and I pulled it up while she was talking. So she'll be pleased. January is when that'll come out. Environmental justice obviously is required by state law. That's going to be covered in your land use element. So that'll get covered later on in 2021, but we have not forgotten that. So just wanted to put that on the record.
appreciate that.
And Ken, I got a message that there were no other callers. Something happened, and technically they are not able to communicate that. But I was told there were no more callers.
Awesome, thank you.
And I will apologize for calling it canals instead of creeks. That's
Well,
my C
it's-
problem.
I was
That's-
guilty of that too.
That's
because
my Dutch heritage with canals, so sorry. Creeks, yeah.
Those
Well-
canals, I don't think they were natural, they were man-made.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
I know.
the creeks that we have now have all been filled in with concrete.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go over
Not-
there,
Not all, I mean, they've been
There's some
recreated in
sections,
some
there's
ways.
some sections, yeah. And then we have the canal that does go through the middle of the city, so,
So do you
okay,
just
anyway, we
call
got
them,
creeks and canals, sorry.
well, do you just call it, I mean, because you're talking creeks, canals, any other stormwater runoff, really? I mean, do you just want to kind of blanket it with, stormwater runoff paths? I don't know.
Waterways.
Waterways?
They'll come up with something.
Creeks, canals, and other.
I mean, I agree with what Alan's saying. We can broaden it, say waterways, and have IE
Yeah,
or
yeah, just cover it. Yeah.
Perfect.
How about calling them canals?
Canals.
Oh,
We'll
See
create a
otters
whole
in
new
there.
language. Was there any other comments, questions, or direction for the team on the element at
I
this
think I
point?
complained about my stuff.
So, Brent, you know where you're going.
I know where I'm going.
That's funny.
You going back to court tomorrow?
Going back to court.
It's
Oh,
about
geez, all right.
It's
Good
about
luck
Don't
with
know
it.
what the verdict yet.
it's
So,
it's about the friends you make along the way, Brent.
I don't think I'm going to make a friend. We'll see.
All right. So what's our next steps?
So, Jim, did you go over the next steps about the next element that's coming up?
No, I didn't. We ended the PowerPoint presentation before that.
Okay. So what our plan is to take all of the feedback, and we'll work with city staff to determine public comment that makes it in, and then we'll prepare a revised element that'll come back most likely January. But the next element that's coming forward for GPAC is on December 16th, and that is going to be the open space, parks, and recreation element. City staff is currently reviewing that, so you should be seeing that fairly soon. Similar process, we won't have a PowerPoint in the beginning to explain what a goal and a policy is. We'll just walk right into the element. The plan after that meeting is we'll take all of GPAC's comment and public comment, and then we'll provide all of those comments consolidated and the element to Rec and Park, and then they'll review it separately in the month of January.
Okay.
Brent, it occurs to me that given the comment about looking for the climate change, sustainability issues to be addressed, we might provide a table of contents, at least the tentative table of contents for the entire plan. So both the GPAC and the public can see all the elements and essentially all the goal topics that we'll be addressing, so that all of you can kind of get a broad picture of what's coming.
Right.
Yep, I can provide that to GPAC at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Great.
Helpful. Awesome.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Troy, do we have any announcements or correspondence we need to deal with?
It's a quasi announcement. I was just wanting to check with the GPAC. So, we restarted our meetings. We historically had third Wednesdays, so we kept that. But I wanted to make sure that the time that we have at 5:30, is that from a GPAC perspective, is that a good time? Does it need to be later? Does it need to be earlier? I just wanted to make sure and get your feedback for our upcoming meeting on December 16th.
I'm
Fine for me.
okay.
Fine for me.
Yeah,
All right.
I'd have to check with my budget advisory, but I'll work around it. I'll figure it out.
Okay.
That's a new
There's no-
committee for me.
We're all good.
Well,
We're all good.
all right, that sounds great. Then I don't have any other announcements to make or
Any members
correspondence.
I
of the
would-
committee? Oh,
If
June.
if I could just add, Alan, I think we can check with the fire department about the dead tree issue you brought up, and just see if they do have any policies about that. So
That'd be great.
We'll get back with that info.
Great, thank you.
Any announcements from the committee members?
No?
Awesome. All right, we will see you all again at our next regular meeting, which is December 16th.
All right.
Thanks.
Good night. Thank
Session.
you.
Thank you, team.
Everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.